Now that the Steam Machine has been announced, there's a ton of rumors flying around about it, so let's get into them and try to cut through the noise. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about Steam hardware. Huge shout out to you guys for helping this channel grow over the past week. I really appreciate it a lot. We are at about 85,000 subscribers here on the channel. My goal is 100,000 by the end of the year, so if you enjoy the content, help me out by subscribing and setting your notifications to all. But yeah, let's jump right into this video because I've been excited to talk about it all day. So I've been seeing some crazy stuff being said about the Steam Machine. Some of it is kind of believable, some of it is even true, but a lot of it is flat out false, which brings us to the first myth that I've seen, which is if Valve prices this thing too fairly, a bunch of corporations are going to buy them all out from under us and no gamers are going to be able to get their hands on a Steam Machine. So I have no idea where this came from. I tried to do some research. Someone told me that Linus is the first one to say it, and like I understand where whoever started this is coming from, right? Like if you make a really solid PC that can fit under a TV in a small section of your desk, it's relatively cheap, it's easy to start up, you can install Windows on it. I could see a company maybe wanting to buy those in a big batch to roll out in their offices or send to people's houses if they're working remote, because you can easily install the firmware or the special version of Windows with all the security you need and the special apps on it. And this one's so easy to debunk, I don't really understand how it spread as far and as fast as it did, because, you know, again, it's super easy to debunk. So like if you remember back to when the Steam Deck came out, you need a Steam account with decent standing. Like you have to have logged in within a certain amount of time and bought at least a few games and put a certain amount of hours into game time. Like there were multiple requirements, if I remember correctly, for both the Steam Deck LCD and the Steam Deck OLED. I remember it specifically with the Steam Deck OLED because I really wanted the limited edition 1 terabyte. When the store went live, it seemed like everyone else wanted the limited edition one, so the store crashed. You could add it to your cart, you couldn't check out, and if you tried it too many times, your Steam account would get temporarily locked out. So I made a new Steam account. I ordered a second Steam Deck OLED, just a regular edition, in case I didn't get the limited one, and that order went through, but it was canceled because I had just made the account. So whether Valve knew who I was or not, they didn't care. They said this is probably a scalper trying to get their hands on a Steam Deck to sell online for more money than it's worth, so they just canceled the order. Thankfully, the account wasn't deactivated. I don't really use it or anything, but that would have sucked to have an account deactivated on Steam. So knowing that kind of just puts the correct block in place to stop a big company from buying up a bunch of Steam Decks. Another reason is all these corporations that, you know, use big workstations, they have hundreds, if not thousands of different computers, monitors, and everything else. They have contracts with vendors, right? Like a vendor is a middleman between the company and a computer company. So the main company that makes computers that businesses use still to this day is Dell. So like there's a middleman vendor that's like, hey, I cover Southeast Michigan. I can get you wholesale deals if you commit to buying a lot of PCs, monitors, keyboards, and mouses. And if you do that, I'll get you a good deal on them. And, you know, they sign contracts and everything to use those specific brand of computers for X number of years. Because, you know, you buy a big batch of them right out of the gate, but they break, you need more, you hire more people than you initially bought. So they don't want you going to a different vendor or a different store and buying a different PC. And if you're using the same hardware, you have it unified across an entire corporation, it's really easy to upgrade it and push out updates to everyone because, you know, it's all the same hardware. You don't got to make boutique different versions of your internal operating system for all these different types of computers. It's usually the executives who get to pick. And I know this because I was an IT person when I was in college and for a year after college at a chemical company. Like I got an internship, which was basically a job where I went to the IT department and I set up all these Dell PCs. I'd have to download the version of Windows from the server. I'd have to get all the apps set up. I'd have to change passwords. And I even had to interface with vendors. So like, yeah, there's no way a corporation is going to come in and clean sweep all the Steam machines or Steam frames or whatever. It's just not going to happen. It's like literally impossible for a corporation to do that. And there's no incentive for them to do that. The only companies I could see making something like that happen are like smaller startups, right? Like they have a little bit of VC money. They need to get their computers all set up. So they go to Steam. They say, hey, if you work here and you have a Steam account, let us use it to buy up a couple PCs. But like, they're never going to buy enough for it to make a meaningful difference in the amount of Steam machines that are for sale. So like, I don't think it's going to have any bearing on the price of the Steam machine. You know, the idea that if they price it at $450, it'll be too good of a deal and all these corporations will scoop them up. Like, that's crazy snake oil type shit being passed around. And I've seen it all weekend long. Like, when I was in line at Epcot, just scrolling through my phone, I kept seeing people talking about it. And I was like, is no one going to kind of correct this and just point it out? But thankfully, Tom from Moore's Law is Dead kind of took people to task on it. But yeah, if you're worried about it not being cheap or as cheap as it could be because a corporation's going to buy them up, don't worry about that at all. That's not even a risk. I would guarantee it, as close to guaranteeing it as I can get without being an employee at Valve. That's how sure I am. But that brings us to the second myth, which has to do with memory shortages. So if you didn't know, there's a lot of AI stuff going on in the world right now. All these companies need computers to run their LLMs or their small languages or whatever you want to call them. So they're buying up all the different RAM, all the different storage, and it's basically driving the price through the roof because the rest of the economy sucks right now pretty much around the world. So all these companies like Samsung are not building new factories to produce more RAM. So what they're doing is saying, well, we're just going to increase the price of the RAM because it'll disincentivize consumers from buying more RAM or upgrading their PC. And then if these companies want to buy a lot of RAM from us or a lot of NVMe drives, they'll pay the inflated price because none of our competition can keep up either. It's just like artificial inflation of prices because they can do it and they'll make a ton of money doing it. So like one part of the myth is completely true. Samsung is raising the price of DDR5 RAM and other storage options because they can make that much money doing it. And I think that's a huge reason why Valve has not announced the price of the Steam machine. It's not just because of the RAM. It's because any of the components that they're using, the price to manufacture or get those wholesale for these computers could change overnight. And suddenly, if it happens with multiple parts at the same time, if they lock in on a price that's relatively cheap, like $450, and they want to break even or make a small profit, that really matters, right? Like if you're increasing the price overnight by $50 even, just a small amount of increase on the cost to make these computers, that compounds with the amount of sales that you make. So it's going to be a huge hit to Valve. So the smart thing to do is obviously just wait as close as possible to the launch to make sure, you know, you're within a healthy window where the component prices go up, you're still at least covered for a little while, and then you can increase or decrease the price accordingly later on. So where the myth lies is that this is what's going to ratchet up the price to like over $1,000. I know that Xbox people really want that to be true because the rumors about the Magnus are that it's going to be $1,200, but the other rumors are that it's going to be extremely performant. It's going to be a high-end gaming PC, so the $1,200 price is going to make sense for the parts that are in it. So I don't think really anyone has much to worry about here when it comes to that. And also, even just looking at the reality where component prices are going up, Valve has a lot of data from launching the Steam Deck, so I would hope that, you know, they looked at the situation where the Steam Deck had the reservation system, it was selling out all the time, it was really difficult to get. I hope they took that data and just made a better plan, right? Like maybe they've been stockpiling all these parts for a while now. They have a bunch of produced Steam machines in their factory ready to ship out. We don't know this, but I would assume that they didn't just waste all that data basically determining how many people are going to want it at launch versus how many they can stockpile. And the other thing that's really cool is when, you know, Sony got into a situation where their components didn't go down in price and they went up in price. Yeah, they reduced the size of the PlayStation 5's motherboard and stuff, but they, you know, they want to make a profit. So they kept increasing the price of the PS5. Nintendo increased the price of the original Nintendo Switch. Xbox has increased the price of the Xbox multiple times, all because those three companies want to make a profit no matter what. They're done with the days of subsidizing the console and making it back up later on the store, whereas Valve, on the other hand, is not like that. They subsidize the Steam Deck at launch. They subsidize it now. I would assume they make a small profit now just because maybe the price on the components got a little bit cheaper since it was semi-custom, but I think with the Steam machine, they'll do the same thing. They want to get it as cheap as possible to sell as many of them as possible through Steam. So yeah, I don't think we really have anything to worry about here because the worst it ever got for the Steam Deck was when the component prices went up and the supply chain issues started happening earlier this year. They just stopped selling it for like 3 weeks while they waited to see if the prices were going to continue to go up. They didn't. So then they just resumed sale at the normal price. They've never raised the price of the Steam Deck. They've kept it about the same. And in some ways, you know, by removing and adding different models of of the Steam Deck between the OLED and getting rid of some of the LCDs, they've made it even better. Like specifically the $399 one has gotten much better. It used to be a 64 gig NAND drive and now it's a full-on SSD. So like Valve, as far as I'm concerned right now, is in the clear by every metric when it comes to this shortage of DDR5 RAM. I don't think it's going to be well over $1,000. I would also do my best to guarantee that. That's how much I believe that one as well. But that brings me to the third myth, which is, going to be familiar to anyone who watches this channel for Steam Deck content. And the myth is that this thing is so underpowered that no matter what cost Valve puts on it, it's not going to be worth it. The main console it's being compared to is the PlayStation 5 because it's right between the PS5 and PS5 Pro. On the GPU side, it's a little bit worse than the PS5, right? Like it's not pushing as much graphical power, but as someone who covers a lot of PS5 news and looks into the specs of all these things, the CPU is what really matters because the GPU in the PS5 is excellent. It pushes a lot of power, but it pushes so much power that it's held back by the CPU. The CPU is not strong in the PS5 or even the PS5 Pro. So while you've got all this overhead for graphics technology, if you throw a game at it like Metal Gear Solid Delta, Jedi Survivor was one from back in the day, the Dead Space remake, any of these games that use Unreal Engine 5 or have forced ray tracing or, have big open maps and are graphically demanding that hammer the CPU, your GPU is held back by that CPU and you see stuttering, you see frame drops, You okay? You see stuttering, you see frame drops, you don't get consistent FPS. But the cool thing is the Steam Machine CPU is not only better than the PlayStation 5s, it's better than the PS5 Pros by like a wide margin. So even though the GPU is a little bit below the power of the PS5, it's not going to be held back by the CPU. And I think Valve was kind of trying to display that with the games they showed off, because as you remember, they showed off Silent Hill F and Metal Gear Solid Delta. Both of those games famously have a lot of issues on PlayStation 5 base consoles because that engine has forced ray tracing and is CPU dependent. So I think we're going to be just fine with performance. I think they're over-promising a little bit when it comes to saying 4K 60 with FSR because, yeah, you could probably get it if you used ultra performance in the lowest settings, and that works fine on a Steam Deck, which is like a 7-inch screen and it's 800p. But when you blow it up on a 4K TV, that's going to look horrendous. So I would not buy into that. I would imagine the best this will do is like 1440p balanced 60 FPS with medium to high settings, and then at 1080p you won't even need upscaling. You'll just be able to play games natively, use FSR's DLAA equivalent, and be just fine. But yeah, I don't think it's going to get 4K 60, kind of like the PS5 doesn't, because it upscales the exact same way, like dramatically from low resolutions up to 4K. But it's not going to be this low powered piece of shit that everyone's kind of making it out to be because it's kind of competing with their favorite console. You know what I'm saying? And that brings me to the last myth, which is that PC players will only use top of the line hardware. I know where this one comes from for sure. Like there's the PC Master Race meme. If you watch any YouTuber who talks about PC hardware, they kind of make it seem like the only options you have are like a 5090 or a 9070 XT and a 9800X 3D and 64 gigs of RAM and water coolers and everything else. But like if you look at the Steam hardware survey, 70% of the people on Steam are using hardware that's worse than what's in the Steam machine. So they looked at where everyone was at as a baseline and went a few points up from that. So it'll either feel like a lateral move for most people or at best a pretty decent upgrade over what they already have. So yeah, I understand again why people sort of think all PC players are rocking 5090s and spending $3,000 to $5,000 on PCs, but in reality, most people are using 3060s, 4060s, Ryzen 5s. No one's really using Intel CPUs anymore, I don't think, because they've really been held back over the years. But if you are, it's not that big of a deal. So I think they're in a really healthy sweet spot where they're going to find a good price, good performance for the vast majority of PC users out there. And it's not just the same as building a PC. There's extra add-ons like, the Steam Controller 2. There's the whole Wi-Fi streaming to the Steam Frame VR headset. Like I'm pretty sure it has that adapter that comes with the headset built into it. It's got a specific radio for the controller. It's a very small package where like 60% of it is heatsink. So there's extra work going into it to make it an extremely small form factor and more more of a halfway point between a console and a PC, which is exactly what the Steam Deck is. It's a halfway point between a PC and a Nintendo Switch 2, and I think it's all the better for it. So yeah, I think we're going to be just fine at this performance level, and I even think some people who are playing on 4060 laptops are going to look at this and think it's a great purchase, and then they're going to be like, I missed the portability, and bam, they're going to get a $399 Steam Deck and be extremely happy. Like, Valve is growing the ecosystem, and I think it's going to work out just fine. Anyway, guys, my flight back from Florida was at like 7 a.m. I am dead tired. I'm sunburned, so I'm going to get out of here. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.